Brunei is known throughout the world not only for its sultan, but also for its oil. The royal family has become astronomically wealthy and has shared that wealth amongst the small population. But in Brunei, you're not supposed to discuss it.
Talking about wealth, Brunei's money is a taboo in this country. It's constitutionally banned.
The Sultan's spending became the stuff of legend. His car collection alone was said to include 500 Rolls-Royces and hundreds of other classic cars. For his own personal use, he had a jumbo jet customized with gold fittings, believed to be worth $233 million. To the outside world, he was the king of Bling. He built the biggest palace in the world, the Istana Nurul Iman, its gold dome towering above the Brunei River and the water villages below. The centralized financial system set up after independence was open to abuse, but the Sultan could have never imagined it would later be his own brother who would be accused of stealing from state coffers. From the 16th century, Brunei's history became dominated by the arrival of European seafarers. First the Portuguese, then Spanish, and finally the British. It was the importance of establishing and maintaining the spice trade that made the country a tactically important place for the Europeans. While the Spanish failed to overrun Brunei, the British arrived in the 18th century looking to get a foothold in the bay to keep their trade routes open. By this time, Brunei's empire was in decline. Brunei's sultans found themselves sandwiched between competing and expanding interests on Borneo. Ahmad Tajuddin became Sultan of Brunei at the age of just 11. With a minor on the throne, it was no surprise that the British were making most of the decisions for the country. The British effectively modernized Brunei, but compared with the rest of Asia, the country was relatively poor. This was about to change dramatically. Shell's discovery of oil in 1929 meant the country's roads, railways, and housing were built at an incredible rate. By 1936, the country's debts had been paid off. From nowhere, Brunei became the third biggest oil exporter in the Commonwealth. But Sultan Tajuddin wasn't personally seeing any of the oil money.
Nothing went to the Sultan at the time because according to the residency agreement, he was entitled for a monthly stipend. Say for example, 6,000 Straits dollars. They were not given direct money and only some profits, 20 to 30% was passed on, and the profits were not directly passed to the royalty. It was kept separate accounts managed by the resident and his assistant.
Until 1950, the Sultans of Brunei played second fiddle to the British residents. All this changed when Tajuddin's half-brother, Omar Ali Saifuddin III, acceded to the throne. Sultan Omar Ali was offered an inducement by the new Prime Minister of Malaysia.
Tunku Abdul Rahman came around and said, I'm going to make you the king of Malaysia. If you join Malaysia, who would want to be? You know, you preside over the rest of the sultans, and why not? I think he was quite persuaded to join Malaysia on those terms. Yeah, but then Tunku Abdul Rahman went back to Malaya and consulted the rulers. And the rulers said, no way, man.
In 1962, a democratic experiment by Sultan Omar Ali Saifuddin III went horribly wrong. When elections didn't go his way, he disbanded the legislature and sparked a rebellion that came without warning. In just 12 days, the uprising had been quashed. Many believe it was Brunei's incredible reserves from the export of oil that were at the heart of the rebellion, and the reason Brunei has not had meaningful elections since. In the mid-1960s, the British government was urging the Sultan to introduce elections and allow Brunei to become independent.
The British wanted the Sultan to move forward to self-government, but it had to be democratic self-government. They wanted him to become a constitutional monarch.
The Sultan, however, was reticent. He feared without a British presence in Brunei, the country was susceptible to attack from hostile neighbors. But at the same time, Omar Ali wanted the British to grant him full control of the country's finances.
Eventually, the British fenced him in, they have nowhere to go, yeah? So he said, look, he said, if you don't do that, I'm going to go, I'm going to abdicate. That did not move Whitehall at all. So you want to go, you go.
The Sultan surprised everyone by suddenly announcing his abdication in 1967 in favor of his firstborn son, Hassan al-Bolkiah. In 1984, Brunei finally agreed to become fully independent from Britain. Membership to ASEAN, the Commonwealth and the United Nations followed soon after. By January 1984, the British residency system, in operation since 1906, formally came to an end. The country became known as Brunei Negara Darussalam, an abode of peace, and the Sultan became Prime Minister and Defence Minister. The enormous state reserves that had been controlled by the British were suddenly at his mercy. The Sultan's spending became the stuff of legend. His car collection alone was said to include 500 Rolls-Royces and hundreds of other classic cars. For his own personal use, he had a jumbo jet customized with gold fittings, believed to be worth $233 million. To the outside world, he was the king of Bling. In 1997, the scandal of Prince Geoffrey's spectacular spending hit the headlines. He was Minister of Finance and had a reputation as a playboy, blowing millions through his own company on projects that he's alleged to have put in his personal name and not that of the country. The Sultan filed legal proceedings against his brother, then dropped them when he realized just how embarrassing the scandal would be. Geoffrey's extravagant purchases were put up for auction.
I'll be on 2,400, 2,400, 2,005, 531.
Prince Geoffrey's two most famous projects were built next door to each other. When it first opened, Tutong Park attracted upwards of 5,000 people every day. Now it's been left to decay, and on average, less than 200 people visit daily. The second project was one of the world's most expensive hotels, the $1 billion 600-room Empire, with real gold leaf lining the walls and suites costing up to $14,000 a night.
It was said to be a project which would need to be filled nightly for something like 100 years in order to pay back the investment. It was a hotel, and Brunei hasn't got a very lively tourist trade, and most of the tourists who come would not be able to afford to stay in a hotel like that.
Like Tutong, the Empire is barely used and has created a vast black hole in Brunei's finances. Brunei is littered with projects began by Prince Geoffrey and never completed.
He was so ambitious. And what's happening in Dubai now, it also happened in a small way in Brunei, because Prince Geoffrey started to build a lot of palaces, a lot of flats and a lot of dream buildings, which was useless for Brunei.
He was accused by the Sultan of embezzling $15 billion from the country's accounts.
The scandals relating to the use of money in the past weakened the prestige of the monarchy.
Prince Geoffrey described himself as the fall guy for his family's excesses.
I'm sure the Sultan felt deeply betrayed by Geoffrey, and he must have realized that he, the Sultan, had a sort of character flaw, that he had been too trusting. He trusted international opportunists such as Khashoggi, El Fayed, but it had never damaged him. However, in the case of his own brother, I think he was really made to realize how careless and over-trusting he had been, and I think it must have had a deep effect on him.
Brunei suffered in the Asian economic downturn of the late 90s. From being a country with incredible reserves and a budget surplus, it suddenly found itself dangerously low on funds. The era of super spending came to an end. The Sultan became much more circumspect about money. He also took over from his brother as Minister of Finance, unable to trust anyone else with the state funds.
We should go back to more transparency where Brunei's wealth is concerned. We must know where the money is going, where is being invested, what is being done. And unless we do that, there's going to be problems like Prince Jeffrey misusing the funds.
In 2004, the Sultan declared himself infallible and immune from prosecution. Freed of Brunei's colonial masters, today his grip on power knows no bounds.